Timecop. A novel by S.D. Perry, based on a screenplay by Mark Verheiden. Story by Mike Richardson and Mark Verheiden. This is a Pliskin audiobook presentation. Wall Street, October 30, 1929. Walker stepped into Atwood's private office exactly 4 minutes before Atwood was going to come in. He locked the double doors and looked around. It was a nice room. Big wood paneling, carpet. A trio of slender, fluted metal deco torch lamps stood against one wall. There were padded leather chairs and a heavy oak coffee table set to one side, and the whole place smelled faintly of expensive cigars. A man's room, dedicated to the business of men. In this period, women only rarely figured into high finance. He pulled his pistol and walked to the desk, weapon ready. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. He'd brought an HK. The plastic Glock didn't travel well, they'd learned, though nobody knew why, exactly. He was alone, on the 10th floor of the Float Bower and Truesdale brokerage concern, in a room just next to the communal main office. It sounded frantic out there, not a surprise when you considered the date. There was an old-fashioned Philco console radio behind the desk. Walker reached over and flipped it on. It took a second for anything to happen as the tubes warmed up. A blast of loud static came finally. He turned the volume down. A voice syrupy enough to cause diabetes said, "And that was the mellifluous voice of Cray McDonough in his Irish. Walker turned it off. Some hit parade. They were a long way from retro Zulu rock here. There was a distant scream from down in the street, joined by a chorus of other shouts, followed by a sudden, final crash that Walker heard even over the commotion outside the office. Walker moved to the window and looked out through the wooden slat blinds, in time to see a mob of onlookers push forward to the base of the building he was in. He noticed that most of the men wore hats. All of the women were clad in dresses or blouses and skirts. Almost immediately, 2 mounted policemen reined up and started to clear the crowd. Apparently the jumper had landed on a parked car. He glanced at his watch and nodded to himself. That would be Float Bower. The man had died right on the schedule. Amazing that men would jump off tall buildings and kill themselves over money. Alive, you could try again. Dead was dead forever. No chance to change anything. No hope at all. Suicide was stupid, right up there with war. The doors rattled briefly as one of the secretaries or another colleague tried to get to a window. It sounded yet more chaotic on the main floor, men and women crying and shouting. Walker touched the long-healed scar that twisted down his temple, the gesture almost absent, his own personal reminder of death. Time was short, so to speak. He raised his weapon and went to stand beside the door. A minute passed. He heard the siren of a 1920s ambulance out in the street. He waited. The door rattled again, this time with the metallic click of keys against tumblers, and in walked Lyle Atwood, clutching his briefcase and the day's paper. Walker could see "Market Crashes" in 60-point letters across the top of the newspaper. The phone started to ring the second Atwood walked in. He slammed the door behind him and walked to the desk, set his briefcase down. He hooked the receiver under his chin and unlatched the case, stood there, his back to Walker. Yeah. Let me talk to Ross.
Hey!
Atwood pulled another newspaper from his case as he waited for Ross. Walker could only make out the top headline, L.A. Smog Kills 40. He had read it earlier, a current USA Today, July 12th, 2004. Walker watched as Atwood opened each newspaper to its financial section and laid them across his desk. Greed didn't suit him. He had put on a small belly, and there was a slickness to his features that hadn't been there before. He had lost more hair, too. Sad, though that was the least of it. Ross, I want another 10,000 AT&T. Yes, I know. Call it an act of faith. I really think things are going to turn around. Right, I got a crystal ball. I can see into the future. Yeah. He hung up and started around the desk toward his wooden chair, grinning. No time like the present. Walker stepped out from the shadows and aimed his weapon at Atwood, who turned, warned somehow. Saw a gun pointed directly between his shocked eyes. Atwood collapsed into his chair, grin wiped away. A flurry of expressions fled across his face. Surprise, recognition, dread, all replaced by a pleading look that Walker didn't like, had never thought he would see. Shit. He hated this more than he'd expected, now that he was into it. Walker. He moved closer, gun never wavering. So, how are you, Lyle? Atwood raised his hands slowly, and Walker wondered what one of the passing secretaries might think if they could see into the office. A man in a shiny, buckled TEC uniform, not a 20s outfit by any means, pointing a funny-looking gun at Mr. Atwood. Probably not too bizarre around here these days. According to the files, the crash sent a lot of people over the edge. Atwood was no poker player. A nervous, cheesy grin appeared on his face, and his palms opened outward. Hey, partner, he said, with a tone of voice that suggested he was happy to see him. Sad. Ex-partner, said Walker. Are you armed? Atwood shook his head earnestly. No, I'm a businessman. This is Wall Street. It wouldn't be appropriate. Walker sighed and holstered his weapon. Whatever else he might have become, Atwood hadn't ever been a liar. Walker moved closer to the desk and snatched up the USA Today. He flicked a glance at the briefcase. Inside was a mini CD player and a set of earphones. He gathered those up as well and stuffed them into his shoulder pack. Couldn't have any anachronisms floating around to screw up the flow. Sure, anybody who found the paper might think it was a joke somebody had printed up, color or not. But the CD player, that would raise a few eyebrows. Maybe they'd think it was little green men from Mars, until they saw the Made in Japan label. Atwood started his plea. Look, Max, I'm not going to change a thing that matters. Not a thing. Sweat had beaded up on his balding brow. The only ripples will be in my own swimming pool. I ran all the scenarios to the 10th decimal point. Walker jerked his head upward for Atwood to stand. Get up, Lyle. He fumbled out of his chair to face Walker. Nice place, Walker said and glanced around. You couldn't have done this by yourself. Who supplied the ride? Atwood couldn't seem to stop smiling, as weak and unhappy as it looked. I'm not hurting anyone, Max. It's America, you know. I just took an opportunity. Walker hated to see this, especially from Atwood. They had been friends once. What seemed like a very long time ago. He sighed again. "You're coming back," he said. "There was no other way." Bam! The door exploded inward, and two enormous men rushed in. Bodyguards. Atwood must have tripped some kind of an alarm. Walker reached for his gun, then thought better of it. Neither man was armed. He moved his hand away from his pistol. You had to be careful with players you hadn't charted and didn't know. One of these goons could be the father or grandfather of somebody who mattered. Shoot him, and that could cause big troubles. Always a problem, trying to figure out if sneezing on the wrong person might butterfly its way through history and turn into a damn tornado down the line. Better to play it safe. He had his hands and his skills. Better to use them and keep from permanently damaging these two. The first man into the room sported short, dark, slicked-down hair and a handlebar mustache. His lips were pressed in a tight line, and he raised his fists, palms inward in a quaint boxing style. "I once went 10 rounds with John L. Sullivan," he said, and started to circle his fists. Walker wanted to shake his head. He was a boxing buff. Sullivan had been dead more than a decade since the end of the Great War. This guy was maybe 35. If he'd sparred with Sullivan, say 15 years ago, the old champion would have had to have been at least 55, and drunk most of the time by then. Facing a real hero here. "Put up your dukes." "Right." Walker V stepped to his left, rammed his right fist into Dukes' solar plexus, and hooked his right foot behind the man's heel in a fast sweep. The Marquis of Queensberry would have been horrified at the illegal and unsportsmanlike move. Dukes gasped, unable to breathe, and went down like a sack of bricks. He took one of the fluted lamps with him. Glass shattered and the lamp snapped off at the base. "You went 10 with John L." "Hey, I saw Tyson beat Spinks on HBO," Walker said. He spun, but not fast enough. The second man wore a snug vest over a long-sleeved white shirt. He wrapped his arms around Walker from behind and squeezed, lifted him off of the floor. Walker struggled as Sleeves' vice grip tightened. Another second, and his ribs would give. Arches. Walker threw himself to the left so that he faced one arched wall. He pushed out with his legs and his feet scraped at the arch, then found purchase. With Sleeves behind, he ran up the wall and broke the man's crushing grip. He finished the back somersault, landed behind. Sleeves, and double-kicked. Hit the confused Sleeves just behind the knees. Sleeves went down. He cursed, rolled, and grabbed for the nearest weapon, the stem of the shattered lamp. He leapt up and swung the lamp clumsily at Walker. Walker dropped in a side split under the awkward swing. The metal rod missed cleanly. Walker jerked himself up. He raised one leg high and came down on the hollow cast metal stick with the heel of his boot. Hard. The lamp pole snapped in two. Before Sleeves could react, Walker reached out and took hold of the two ends of the lamp. He pulled them away and used them like a set of Yawara sticks. He hit the man a dozen times, quick and snappy blows to the ribs, the arms, his chest, working like a rock drummer on speed. As Sleeves crumpled to the floor, Walker delivered his final thrust to the groin. That would keep him down and clutching himself for a while. Probably still be able to father children, but not in the next few days. And at the same second, he heard a sound that he had never thought he'd hear. The click of a massive handgun chambering around, a gun aimed at him by Lyle Atwood. "Shit," he lied. Walker flung the sticks away and took a flying leap at the oak coffee table. He landed on one shoulder and rolled onto the floor. He pulled the table over on top of himself. Gunfire exploded in the room. The table jerked and one of the legs splintered. Atwood was using something big and nasty. Not likely a period .38 or low velocity .45. Probably a .40. If it was the same piece he had carried on the job for TEC, fight. Don't think. Move. Walker jumped from the crouch to take cover behind one of the heavy chairs. The two shots blew the padded headrest into smoking pieces, missed his skull by centimeters. Before Walker could pull his own gun, one of the doors swung open, and a high, screechy voice called out, "Mr. Atwood, are you, Walker saw Atwood spin to point at the intruding secretary. Walker ran past the door and slammed it closed, kept moving, a split second before Atwood sent 3 rounds through the thick wood. Stupid! Running footsteps paired with sobs meant the secretary was still alive, at least. While Atwood was distracted, Walker sprinted and dove, landed behind the desk. Several rounds pounded the desk. Good thing they weren't armor-piercing. And Walker peeped around the edge as Atwood moved toward him, cautious. Walker didn't want to kill him. He stood and faced Atwood. "Hi, partner," Walker said. Ex-partner. Atwood centered the bore on Walker's chest. "Sorry." He pulled the trigger. Click. Lyle looked at the gun stupidly, then squeezed the trigger again. Nothing. He dropped the gun to the floor and looked up at Walker, gaze panicked. "You never were real good with numbers," Walker said, and moved toward him. His ears still rang from the shots Lyle had fired, shots he'd counted very carefully. Atwood's shoulders sagged as Walker faced him. They only had a minute or two before more people came in, but Walker wanted answers. "Look, Max, if I leave the stock, just go. There's no damage. No damage, no crime." His sweaty face looked almost hopeful. "Nothing changes, nothing at all." This from the man who had just tried very hard to kill him, and yet he didn't feel the anger he knew he should have. Atwood was obviously desperate, and Walker knew what that felt like. "I want a name, Lyle. It won't make any difference. In a few weeks, this guy will run your whole world." Walker stepped closer, kissing distance. He towered over Atwood, who kept talking. "If he doesn't get the money here, he'll get it somewhere else." His eyes brimmed with tears of self-pity and fear. "I can't tell you anything." Walker raised one eyebrow. Atwood looked at him pathetically. "He'll send someone back to wipe out my grandparents, Max. It'll be like I never existed. My mother, my father, wife, kids. My fucking cat." "Your cat." Walker had never seen such an expression of despair. This from a man who once charged a doper hosing them with a submachine gun, cooking on full auto. He'd been a brave man then. Now he was begging. Walker wanted to throw up. Lyle searched his face for some sign of concession, but Walker had no intention of letting it go. None at all. "Shit!" Atwood looked down at his clenched fists, and something went out of him. "You ever hear the name Aaron McComb? Senator McComb?" Walker scowled. "Bullshit. What the hell am I gonna lie for? He's running for president." Atwood suddenly seemed desperate for Walker to believe him. "The man has tapped out his campaign fund, and if I don't make it, he'll send someone else. He already owns half the guys we work with." Walker frowned and leaned closer to Lyle. If it was true, this was big. "Point him out when we get back," he said. Are you fucking kidding? This guy will roll right over you, Max. Lyle choked back tears. If I go back and talk, it's my family. Lyle looked straight into Walker's eyes, and Walker could see the man he had known as his partner beneath the fear. The man who only wanted to make his wife and kids happy. Listen to what I'm saying. My family. If I die here, it's only me. I'm not afraid to go, you know that. But my family. Walker felt for him. He sighed and rested his hands on Atwood's trembling shoulders. You know, I have to take you back, he said softly. I've got no choice. Lyle's face crumpled, and he dropped his gaze to the floor. Neither do I, he said so quietly that Walker almost didn't hear him. Walker tensed, understanding, but too late. Atwood ducked out from beneath his hands and sprinted for the window. Walker moved. He was on him. He grabbed for Atwood's coat and ran with him. They hit the window almost as one. Walker grabbed Lyle's ankle as they plunged out into open air, 10 stories up. He slammed his fist into his belt at the same time, hoped it wasn't too late. The ground rushed at them incredibly fast. Walker had time to register the upturned face of a cop as it all melted away, the cop's ruddy features spinning from shock to awe as the two plummeting men disappeared into thin air.